Jordan Peterson quotes the Russian author Leo Tolstoy here. My position was terrible. I knew I could find nothing in the way of rational knowledge except a denial of life. And in faith I could find nothing except a denial of reason, and this was even more impossible than a denial of life. According to rational knowledge, it followed that life is evil, and people know it. They do not have to live, yet they have lived, and they do live, just as I myself had lived, even though I had known for a long time that life is meaningless and evil. The question that arises in the human mind is, why accept the suffering that life serves you? A perfect example of that theme is the struggle of Berserk's protagonist, Guts. Again and again he is faced by adversity and injustice, from being born from the corpse of his mother, to being betrayed by his best friend and being physically and mentally scarred for life. In the chapters immediately after the eclipse, Guts goes on a vengeance war. It was characterized by the stench of blood, anger and burning flesh. And despite the ugliness of it all, the reader doesn't seem to mind the chaos. It quite frankly is seen as justifiable and exciting. Truly terrible things happen to people. It's no wonder that they are out for revenge. Under such conditions, vengeance seems a moral necessity. How can it be distinguished from the demand for justice? After the experience of terrible atrocity, isn't forgiveness just cowardice or lack of willpower? And yet, Guts does not completely devolve into a mindless maniac. Even in the harshest conditions of the Berserk world, with its haunting apostles, Guts continues struggling not to cross the line of evil, which would probably ultimately be the using of his behelit. Hence why Guts is an archetype of the realistic, good human. Yes, you commit egregious mistakes. Yes, you fall into the bottomless abyss of hopelessness and despair. But you still find a way to remain true to yourself and loyal to others. True strength comes from the exhausting battle between good and evil, which first and foremost starts within your heart. The Bible says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Dogs are predators, so are cats. They kill things and eat them. It's not pretty, but we'll take them as pets and care for them and give them their medication when they are sick, regardless. Why? They are predators, but it's just their nature. They do not bear responsibility for it. They are hungry, not evil. They don't have the presence of mind, the creativity, and above all, the self-consciousness necessary for the inspired cruelty of man. Why not? It's simple. Unlike us, predators have no comprehension of their fundamental weakness, their fundamental vulnerability, their own subjugation to pain and death. But we know exactly how and where we can be hurt and why. That is as good a definition as any of self-consciousness. We are aware of our own defenselessness, finitude and mortality. We can feel pain and self-disgust and shame and horror, and we know it. We know what makes us suffer. We know how dread and pain can be inflicted on us, and that means we know exactly how to inflict it on others. We know how we are naked and how that nakedness can be exploited. And that means we know how others are naked and how they can be exploited. Consciousness of the imperfect beings that humans are makes us susceptible to that very evil we talked about previously. We are aware that we are vulnerable to attacks. So often we choose to exert control over our lives in order to keep everything stable. That is ignorance of the greatest degree, that one can possess the world in such a way. Griffith fell exactly into that trap of self-belief and arrogance. So much so that the departure of his only truly desirable person, Guts, makes him go insane and cause his own downfall. Unfortunately, in order for him to achieve some type of control and stability over his life, he has to send everyone he once knew and loved to hell. Guts, on the other hand, lives with the fact that his life is chaos, and he's a mere human and nothing more. The sacrificial mark on his neck reminds him of that. He is a lamb for slaughter, like any else. Well, as we know, the eclipse deeply enraged and made Guts bitter, and for good reason. However, his path of destruction was not sustainable in any way conceivable. It is easy to believe that people are arrogant and egoistical and always looking out for themselves. The cynicism that makes that opinion a universal truism is widespread and fashionable. But such an orientation to the world is not at all characteristic of many people. They have the opposite problem. They shoulder intolerable burdens of self-disgust, self-contempt, shame and self-consciousness. Thus, instead of narcissistically inflating their own importance, they don't value themselves at all. And they don't take care of themselves with attention and skill. It seems that people often don't really believe that they deserve the best care, personally speaking. Your being is inexorably tied up with that of others, and your mistreatment of yourself can dent, perhaps in the aftermath of suicide, when those left behind are often both bereft and traumatized. What do you think? Guts felt no remorse and guilt for Griffith's downfall. He probably did most of any human. And then Rickard points out this to Guts in the manga. You left Casca behind. You knew she was unstable and you still left her. You are no different from Griffith. As revenge poisoned Guts' mind and he barely cared anymore if he would live, Casca's strongest protector was absent. And even though protecting Casca and the others was a step forwards towards good and away from the darkest of times for Guts during the start of his revenge quest, his way of living was still starkly detrimental to body and soul. In chapter 137, Shirke tells Guts as he's battling the beast of darkness, you mustn't just sacrifice yourself for others. You need to consider your own well-being. If you keep pushing yourself like this, you end up destroying yourself. If Guts kept his health on point, then it would mean good for his future. You could help direct the world on its careening trajectory, a bit more toward heaven and a bit more away from hell. Once having understood hell, researched it, so to speak, particularly your own individual hell, you could decide against going there or creating that. You could aim elsewhere. You could, in fact, devote your life to this. That would justify your miserable existence. That would atone for your sinful nature and replace your shame and self-consciousness with natural pride and forthright confidence of someone who has learned once again to walk with God in the garden.